Hello and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Talk, the only show on a Tuesday morning that we bring you up close and personal with your parliamentarians. My name is Takudzwa Musakasa, and in today's discussion, we'll be talking about the Zimbabwe's new wave of evictions. Lately, we've been seeing people in Gutu, in Masvingo, in Matabele North complaining about these evictions. And joining us today in the studio, we have Honorable Agency Gumbo. Welcome to the show, Honorable.
Thank you very much for having me here, Taku.
Sure, Honorable. To those who don't know Honorable Agency Gumbo, he's the Member of Parliament for Hatcliffe constituency. So, Honorable, nearly 25 years after the land reform program, we have been seeing disputes over possession of land and settlement. And over hundreds of people have been affected by this. Can you tell us in your own view, how did we get here, Honorable, as a country?
Well, the various inhumane evictions and displacements of citizens that we have been witnessing around the country, Taku, must be understood in the context of historical contradictions surrounding the land question in Zimbabwe. In 1980, when Zimbabwe got its independence, we clung onto and celebrated political independence without embracing economic transition and the resolution of the land question in Zimbabwe. What we experienced with the land reform program, which is popularly titled the fast-track land reform program, was a response by the regime of the day to the land question, which constituted part of the fundamental principles of the liberation struggle in this country. So the fast-track land reform program itself, in as much as its aims were proper and justified, lacked comprehensive planning by the regime of the day. It was a response to the growing discontent amongst the veterans of this country and amongst the natives regarding the land question. And its implementation was then marred with various corruption cases, violations, violence, and illegalities, so to speak. So this becomes the basis of the numerous inconsistencies in government policy, inconsistencies in the national, land policy, which has seen several, discords or several contradictions in recent times and recent moments. When you look at what has happened in the farm areas, what we witness today, the evictions against people who are settled on communal land, so on and so forth. Some of these people are people who were displaced during the land reform program. They were displaced because of the capture by political elites of the land reform program itself. You then realize several individuals who were highly politically connected, grabbing farms, displacing families which were, resident at these farms, which families then sought refuge, sought to settle in communal lands, sought to settle some of them in their tribal lands, distributed to them by the Masabukus and the chiefs in terms of the law. But now you see the clampdown by government without due process on these several individuals. We must mention from the very onset, Takudzwa, that we are against the eviction of people without due notice. We are against the eviction of people from their communal lands, eviction of people from whatever land they settle on, without due process, without due notice, but without a comprehensive plan for the settlement or resettlement of these people. Because it is people's right to shelter, it is people's right to property. This must be guaranteed by the government of the day because the constitution of Zimbabwe guarantees this. So when government plows on its own citizens, evicts people from their settled lands without a clear and deliberate plan and agenda of saying we'll move you from this place, but we have a plan of settling you somewhere, it's as if government is wishing dead its own citizens, Takudzwa.
I heard you very clear. You mentioned about people being being removed from places because of the land reform. Then the Communal Lands Act mentioned about the Sabukus and chiefs having power to give people land in these settlements. My question comes here. for the benefit of the viewers, who has the authority to distribute land in Zimbabwe, and where does their power emanate from?
My starting point, obviously, would be to say to the people of Zimbabwe that the Communal Lands Act itself is a draconian and colonial piece of legislation which ought to be reformed. And we've got as Parliament to take deliberate steps to ensure that we guarantee security of tenure for people settled in communal lands. The Act itself reposes ownership of these lands in the president. In fact, the right for occupation in these lands vests in the president. And, the sabukus, which are the common headmen and the traditional leaders, have, delegated authority to distribute this land, but of course, in collaboration with rural district councils. This is the setup of the law. But what is not guaranteed to the citizen or to the individuals who is given right of occupation is title. So this leaves these people susceptible to evictions, arbitrary evictions, dispossession, and even resettlement. You will realize that many instances I will give an example of this displacement of the Changani people in Chilonga, Chiredzi, for purposes of lucerne production, where numerous families, over 3,000 families, were displaced because there was a development project which a certain private entity allowed by government wanted to undertake under the Ministry of Local Government by July during that time. So this shows you the evil carried by the Communal Lands Act. It leaves individuals and citizens at the mercy of government, which might decide to, embrace profit against the livelihood of people, against the livelihood of its own citizens. Because this displacement, Takudzwa, must be understood not only in the context of moving one person from one place to the other. They must also be understood in the context of destroying the very fabric of our communities and societies. Families are broken down, networks are broken down, communities are broken down. Some communities which have historical and tribal attachments to this land, they are displaced simply because individuals do not have title to their land. So our proposition is that people must be given title even to their communal lands. People must be given title to their tribal lands so that they can continue with the historical attachments to their historical tribes and attachment to these lands. People would have settled in areas for over 20 years, for over 30 years. Some of these people even have been on these lands for over 50 years. They've established their chieftaincies, they've established their family ties, their ancestral graves are in these places, but they can simply be moved and removed in terms of the current land regime, rural and communal land regime. They can be displaced at the mercy of the president, at the mercy of those that are in political power. So we want reform in respect of land tenure in this country, reform to allow people to own land. The Constitution guarantees property rights, but that right cannot be fully exercised or fully enjoyed without proper security to the land.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yes.
In terms of having proper security to the land.
Yes.
I was watching this video of Chilonga people last year, where one woman was actually crying that the family graves are there. From their great-grandmothers, they were buried there, and they're being forced to move. That was a reply that I sought to spread on social media using my platform. The question comes back to: do people know about these laws? Do people have education? What are you doing in your constituents? What are you doing as a parliamentarian to get people to understand about these issues concerning the law need to be reformed, having the law being captured and everything? What are you doing?
Well, the law as it is, coupled with government policy and government's position on these issues, has got to be reformed. It's not really a question of whether or not people have knowledge of the laws. It's a question of whether or not these laws are just. It's a question of whether or not these laws protect the interests And do these laws have the people at heart? So this is why we are agitating for a reform in the laws surrounding land tenure and the protection of citizens from arbitrary evictions, in communal land, so on and so forth. That's why we are agitating that people must be given title to this land. So the knowledge that people must have is the knowledge of the need for reform, the need for reform of the land, of the legal land regime in this country, to allow people the security that is guaranteed, by numerous international conventions, guaranteed even by our constitution, by the very laws that govern this country. Because you realize, Takudzwa, right now that you have individuals who are given, for example, we give a go-to case where it's about a week, notice because of a directive from central government. People are given a week's notice to vacate, areas that they've occupied for years. That is contrary again to Section 68 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which guarantees administrative justice to people to say, every law and a decision of central government or every administrative authority must be reasonable. It's not reasonable to expect someone to relocate, resettle, and entirely shift the structure of their lives in a space of a week. It's arbitrary, it's illegal, it's inhumane, it's contrary to international human rights law.
To those who just tuned in, we are talking about the new wave of evictions in Zimbabwe. We are talking about land settlement and evictions. And joining me in the studio today, I have Honorable Agency Gumbo. Honorable, let's talk about the distribution of land. The distributors of land, to say, people were saying that they've paid chiefs, they've paid their sabukus, even the so-called land barons, they are being given money. And some people were saying they've been paying taxes. I read an article of people in Matebeleland in Rwanda saying that they've been paying taxes since 1999. And in Chitungwiza, some were saying they've been paying the council money. We don't know if this money is going to the council or if those people who are buying land are just keeping this money for themselves. My question comes to, what happens to those individuals in your perspective? Are they going to be compensated the money that they have been paying?
Well, clearly, any person who has been embarking on illegalities must be brought to book. What we want to see is a commitment on this part of government to prosecute all those that are found on the wrong in terms of the shenanigans surrounding land distribution in this country. There's no transparency, and we've always stated that there's no transparency in this country regarding distribution of state land, distribution of communal lands, distribution of even agricultural land. There is a lack of transparency and there's a lot of corruption that inundate these processes. I will make reference to you, the Justice Uchenna Commission, which highlighted shockingly in 2019 that over $3 billion, dollars had been lost in the distribution of state land meant for urban development, purportedly by these land barons who many times, Takudzwa, are political elites or have deep-rooted connections with the ruling ZANU-PF regime. And we have seen these problems. I can make mention of my constituency in Hatcliffe. Up to today, I'm battling 3 notorious land barons, Nyasha Chikwinya, Jonathan Gapare, and Tutisan, who have illegally parceled out state land meant for development of schools, development of clinics. There's an area in Hatcliffe called Hatcliffe Consortium. The distribution of land was shambolic, illegal, and not in accordance with even government policy, to the extent that at one point, the Ministry of Local Government under Sylvia Kasukuwere came and gave a directive that residents must stop paying those land barons. Why? Because we have areas which were meant for schools and clinics and recreational centers have been parceled out as stands. More to that, they've been parceling out of what we call double allocations, where 5 people are sold one particular stand, and yet there's a lack of basic infrastructure in that area. There are no roads. There is no water reticulation. There are no sewers. People on 300 square meters are having to rely on bucket toilet system. In this day and age, in this modern world, you have a residential area in the heart of Harare, You have a residential area in the capital city of the country where people are still using bucket system. Why? Because of the illegalities that characterize the land distribution process, and also a lack of a proper accountability and accounting framework by the central government. You know, they enter into these land development projects. Good, we want people to have houses because it must be government policy to provide housing for all. But that policy must be characterized by proper, efficient frameworks, particularly where there are partnerships that are established between central government and private players. Private players must not be political, private players must not be partisan, and the distribution process itself must be managed centrally by the owners of the land, which is the state. And who is the state, Takudzwa? We are the state, the citizens are the state.
Then you mentioned about me, Takudzwa, buying this land from a land baron.
Yes.
In short, do you have plans for these people that have been given land illegally by these land barons?
Number one, the land barons must be prosecuted. The land barons must be arrested. The land barons must face jail. This is what even Justice Uchenna recommended to the president of Zimbabwe. Recommended that there are illegalities which ought to be prosecuted. There must be a clear and deliberate action plan from government to bring these land barons to account for this land. Because when you sell state land, when you sell state land, you must guarantee the person who has bought it that there will be basic bulk infrastructure in that area. You must guarantee again that this person will receive a lease from government, which will lead to title survey and ensure that they have title deeds. Today we have settlements. I mentioned the Hatcliffe Consortium, and I will mention other areas like Harare South, hopefully, airport, so and so forth, where people are illegally settled. They pay money to cooperative chairpersons, they pay money to land barons. That money is never accounted. If you go to the Ministry of Local Government today and you seek accountability to say, account for all the state land that has been sold to individuals in this country, they will not account. That's why we make mention of almost $3 billion, which has been lost by the Zimbabwean government. You would expect when $3 billion is a lot of money, if it's put into any development, we will have world-class infrastructure in this country. But with bad roads, no roads, bad sewer systems in this country because of these land barons. So the government must be very deliberate. These people ought to be prosecuted. These people must face, the law. These people must go to jail because they are stealing from the future of this country and they are destroying livelihoods. This is why we then end up having situations like in 2005, Operation Murabashir. Again, the same government is coming to prey on its own citizens. Today, we are calling upon the government and we are charging central government to take actions against land barons, take action against people who are illegally stealing from the people of Zimbabwe and destroying the future of our children. That is the position.
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. Thank you, Honorable, for joining us in today's segment. As you have heard it, ladies and gentlemen, it's a question of the land that we're talking about, a question of evictions that we're talking about in today's segment. My name is Takudzwa Musakasa. See you next time.